Well, I'm Lynne Jonell, and I have written a book called Emmy and the Incredible Shrinking Rat, which won the Minnesota Book Award for Children's Literature. And it is a novel, magical fantasy for ages 8 to 12. Well, Emmy is a very good girl. She tries very hard to be good in the hopes that someday someone will actually notice her. And she didn't used to have to try to be that good. You know, she used to be a normal girl with normal, loving parents, but about a year ago, from the time this book starts, her parents inherited a lot of money from great-great-uncle William, and they moved across town to live in a big mansion on the shores of Grayson Lake, and they hired a nanny, Miss Barmy, to take care of Emmy. And ever since then, a lot of things have changed. And her once loving parents now, they just go on all kinds of vacations, and they come home and they're nice and loving for 2 minutes, and all of a sudden they forget that they even have a daughter, and they go off to vacation again. And the kids in her 4th grade classroom look right through her as if she isn't there, and even her teacher doesn't remember her name after a whole year in his classroom. And the only person who really seems to notice Emmy besides her nanny, who notices her maybe a little too much, is the rat, which is a classroom pet. And she sits right by him, and she's started to hear him talk. No one else can hear him. Except in 2 days she finds out that Joe, a soccer star, the soccer star of the whole 4th grade, can hear him also. And then she and Joe team up to figure out with the rat what's the mystery of what's happened in Emmy's life. Well, one of the most interesting things about the book Emmy and the Rat that I discovered was at the end, someone asked me, who are these characters in your life? You know, did these characters come from anything? And I thought about it, and I realized that Emmy and the rat are 2 halves of myself. Part of me is really the good girl who tries very hard to do the right thing, and she was the sort of person who tried hard to get the good grades and please the teacher. And the kind of child that everyone loves to have in class, okay? And then the other half of me is very much like the rat, the rat is the sort of person to sit in the back row and snicker a little bit and make sarcastic comments. And the rat in my life probably came strongly into play when I hit about age 14. But I think the rat was part of me all along, and I still see those 2 parts in myself. It's very, very fun and freeing to be the rat, but the rat is kind of uncomfortable to be around for very long. So then Emmy kicks in and you know, tells people, I didn't really mean it. Another thing I'm really proud of with Emmy, or that I'm really pleased about, is I had always wanted to write middle grade fantasy. In fact, I wanted to write middle grade fantasy in particular ever since 6th grade, when I first read A Wrinkle in Time. I remember where I was. I think you remember where you were at important points in your life, and a lot of people remember exactly where they were at big events. There are some events like 9/11 or John F. Kennedy's assassination for various generations that are really pivotal. And for me, a pivotal moment when I was in 6th grade was when my sister came home from college, and she had been studying children's literature, and she handed me a book. She said, "This is the best book I've ever read." And I was standing in front of the fireplace, and I opened it up and read the first page or so, and then I read the second. And after a while, I sank down to the floor in front of the fireplace, and I never moved from that spot until I had finished the book. And when I finished the last chapter, I read the last chapter again because I couldn't bear for it to be over. And when I finished it the second time, I looked at the title and I looked at the name of the author. And I normally didn't look at the name of the author. I mean, I was 6th grade. Why did I care about the author? But it was Madeline L'Engle. The book was A Wrinkle in Time. And I looked at her name and I thought, this is what I want to do most of all. I want to write books just like this for kids just like me. I have had some of the most interesting conversations with young readers about this book. And one in particular was before the book was published, there was a young man, aged 10, who read it in manuscript form. And I took him out for, I guess I had coffee, he didn't have coffee, but I took him out for a little treat and asked him about the book. And he was very unguarded after a while because he had gotten so caught up in the fantasy. And I asked him what he thought about the things that had happened. I was trying to find out if the fantasy was believable, if I had swept him along in it. And he said, "Oh, I wish things like this happened to me." And I said, "Do you?" And he said, "Yes, very sadly. But some kids are just the sort of kids magic happens to, and some kids aren't, and I'm not one of those kids that magic happens to. But at least I can read the book, and I love that." I was exactly like that. I wanted to bring that experience to kids just like me, and I think I have. That's very exciting for me. My writing discipline, that's sort of an oxymoron. I mean, discipline and writing. I am very disciplined in one way only. I keep at it. But as far as writing daily, as far as writing a regular rhythm, I am all over the map. There are many, many, many days where I sit and stare at the screen or stare at the blank sheet of paper, and by the end of the day I will have written 2 sentences, and I will have deleted them in despair. And those are very hard days. And there are some days where I have written nonstop. I have written into the wee hours. I have looked at the clock when I have finally come to a point that was good to stop at, and I have seen it's 5:30 in the morning and my husband is waking up for work. And those days I might do 5,000 words. When I'm not writing, I love to sail. If it's the summer, I have a little sailboat and I love to go out on Lake Minnetonka or Long Lake or Medicine Lake. And that's a wonderful thing for me to be out alone in the blue water and the sunshine and the wind. And I love to play the piano. I find that I do a lot of music in between scenes when I'm writing. So I'm writing and I get stuck, and instead of going to the refrigerator, which is always a problem, I'll go down to the piano and I'll start playing. And so this year alone I've memorized a bunch of pieces because I love to be able to play wherever I'm at, and that's worked very well. To just switch gears but still have it be creative. The creative juices, I think, keep flowing, but the music is something different, and then when I go back to the page, I'm refreshed. The role libraries have played in my life is huge. I remember getting my first library card, and I remember sitting down and not being able to read and pulling out the picture books and picking out 1 or 2 words that I could sound out, and looking over at the wall of the other bigger books and longing to read so that I could read not only picture books but everything else. Yeah, libraries have been very important to me, and always a place of quiet and peace where I could lose myself in another world and no one would bother me or stop me from going anywhere I wanted. Well, the Minnesota Book Awards, to me, personally, were kind of a huge thing. As a writer, you work in isolation, and you don't see the children for whom you're writing, and you don't see the libraries where they're going to stock your book. You're very tied into the story, and you're hoping it's going to get out there and be read. You're hoping it's going to go to libraries. You're hoping people are going to notice it, but you can't think too much about that when you're writing. You need to think about the story. But you don't get a lot of feedback. And when you finally get that book published, and you have your editor say, "Oh, it's wonderful," you think, "Oh, you know, that's nice, but she has to say that. She paid for it." And then you get an honor, such as the Minnesota Book Award, and you start realizing that you've actually had some kind of impact on people. And this story that was birthed in this very weird, creative way, and that you struggled for many hours and many days to bring to life, actually is out there, actually is being read, and somebody is saying, "Good job." And I wouldn't say it makes it all worthwhile, because I didn't write the book to get an award. I wrote the book to get a story out of me that wanted to come out. And I wrote the book for kids who would read that story. But the honor just gives me a little bit of courage to continue on with that battle, that daily struggle of writing to get these stories out. Because somebody besides my mother or my husband said, "Good job, you're doing well, give us more."